I rubbed baking soda on my cast iron skillet steak and this happened. But what actually happened wasn't what the internet told you would happen. Not at first. And once you understand what I discovered in my own kitchen that afternoon, you're going to rethink every single steak you've cooked in cast iron for the last 10 years. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, I'm going to show you something the viral videos never mention. The one drawback that changes everything about whether you should ever use this method on a skillet you plan to keep in your family for the next 50 years. If you've got cast iron hanging on your kitchen wall or passed down from your mother, subscribe now. And I'd love to hear in the comments below, have you tried the baking soda method on your skillet? What actually happened? Tell me your story. Here's the kitchen truth nobody wants to hear. 3 years ago, I didn't own a single cast iron pan that my grandmother had owned. I had given them away, sold them at an estate sale, didn't think they mattered anymore. Then my wife found an old skillet in her mother's attic, a number 8 Griswold, well seasoned, black as obsidian, sitting in a cardboard box for 20 years. That skillet came home with me that day, and I became obsessed with what it could do, what it had done for her family for generations. Wait, this part is important. When you cook a steak in cast iron, you're not just cooking meat on a surface. You're interacting with a tool that has a history. That skillet absorbs the flavors from every meal that's been cooked in it for 50 years, 100 years. The seasoning is a living thing, and when you use baking soda on it, you're not just tenderizing the beef, you're doing something to the pan itself. The baking soda method works like this. Plainly, sodium bicarbonate raises the pH of the meat's surface. This breaks down the muscle fibers, denatures the proteins, makes the beef tender enough to bite through without your jaw working like a carpentry vise. The chemistry is real. I'm not debating that. But here's what happens to your pan. Baking soda is alkaline, highly alkaline. When you rub it on a steak and let it sit for 15 minutes in your cast iron, because most people do this right in the skillet, you're exposing your seasoning to that alkalinity for those full 15 minutes. The seasoning on cast iron is built from layers of oxidized fat hardened into a protective shell. Alkalinity attacks that shell, not dramatically, not in one application, but in 10 applications, in 20. You start to see your seasoning dull, start to see rust spots appear where none were before. The pan gets sticky to the touch instead of slick. My father-in-law is a blacksmith, works metal, restores old tools. He explained to me that cast iron seasoning is like a patina on copper or bronze, delicate, precious, and once you damage it with the wrong chemistry, you've started a process that takes months to rebuild. 3 weeks of careful cooking, low heat, fat-heavy meals to restore what one baking soda treatment can begin to compromise. So why do it? Why use a method that might cost you the seasoning you've been building for years? The answer comes down to time and money. If you've got a tough cut of beef and you've got 15 minutes, baking soda works. It's fast, it's foolproof. It doesn't require a 3-day marinade in vinegar, the way my wife's great-grandmother did it. Doesn't need slow braising for 6 hours in a Dutch oven with onions and wine. You rub, you wait, you rinse, you cook. Dinner happens on a Tuesday night when you haven't planned ahead. But, and this is the secret I promised you at the start, that speed comes with a cost to the thing you're cooking in. The pan you might want to use for another 50 years. The old methods, the ones that built those heirloom skillets into the treasures they became, they worked with cast iron instead of against it. Vinegar marinades, slow braises, rendered fat, low and even heat. These methods honored the pan, built the seasoning deeper, created a relationship between the cook and the tool that lasted through generations. You need to decide what your steak means to you. Is it a Tuesday night meal, practical and quick, and the skillet is just an appliance? Or is it part of a continuum, a chain that connects you to the people who cooked in that pan before you, and to the people who will cook in it after you're gone. That question, whether you're cooking for speed or for legacy, that's where baking soda and the old methods part ways completely. The baking soda method, I'll be honest about this, it works fast. 15 minutes. You coat the meat, alkaline powder sits on the surface, breaks down proteins through a chemical reaction called denaturing. The meat relaxes, fibers soften. When you sear it, you get a crust. It's science. It's real. But something happens in those 15 minutes that doesn't happen in a 3-day vinegar marinade or a slow braise in a heavy Dutch oven. In the old methods, cast iron itself becomes part of the equation. The pan's thermal mass, its ability to hold and distribute heat evenly, that's not incidental. It's foundational. When you place a tough cut of meat into a Dutch oven that's been heating for 20 minutes, the temperature is stable, constant. The meat braises not in a panicked rush of high heat, but in a gentle, consistent warmth. That's when the connective tissue, collagen, mainly, converts to gelatin. That transformation takes time. Baking soda doesn't do that. It doesn't transform collagen. It doesn't deepen the pan's seasoning. It doesn't teach you anything about how cast iron works or why your grandmother's skillet became an heirloom worth keeping. Here's what I mean by that. Before we continue, I need to be clear about something, and this matters more than you might think right now. The old methods require you to cook with intention. You plan ahead. You start the brine on Monday for Thursday's dinner. You set the Dutch oven in a low oven at dawn, so supper will be ready at 6. This isn't inefficiency. This is the opposite. This is cooking that respects both the ingredient and the tool. When you brine meat for 3 days in a covered crock, the cast iron or ceramic vessel becomes a reactor. The acetic acid in vinegar does the work, yes. It breaks down proteins, but the vessel itself becomes seasoned by the process. Minerals in the brine, the repeated exposure to acidic liquid, this ages the pan slightly, builds character. Sounds romantic, and maybe it is, but it's also measurable. A pan used for brining over 40 years develops a different kind of patina than a pan used for quick sears and fast washes. That's why Esther's great-grandmother's Dutch oven, which came to America in 1892, still cooks better than any new one you could buy today. Not because it was expensive when it was new. It wasn't. But because it's been used for a century and a half in ways that built it up instead of breaking it down. The baking soda method would never touch this vessel. Baking soda requires a quick sear, high heat, fast results. It's incompatible with the slow, patient cooking that actually uses what cast iron is designed to do. This doesn't mean baking soda is wrong. It means it's a different tool for a different purpose. And once you understand the difference, you can choose consciously instead of just following whatever video has the most views. The chalk steak, the one that costs $3 and looks like it'll chew like a shoe, that meat sitting in front of you on a Tuesday night, it deserves better than either a rushed high-heat sear or a chemical shortcut. It deserves the method that will teach you something about your pan, about how your ancestors actually cooked, and about why they kept those pans for their entire lives. That's what we're going to explore now, the real methods, the ones that work with cast iron instead of against it. Before we continue with what comes next, I need you to understand something fundamental about the pans themselves. Cast iron doesn't season overnight. It doesn't build its character in 3 months or even a year. The best seasoning on the best pans comes from decades of cooking, real cooking, the kind that leaves a residue, a memory, a layer of accumulated fat and use. This matters because when you're using baking soda on a modern stainless or non-stick pan, the pan itself is irrelevant. Swap the pans and the chemistry stays the same. But cast iron is a partner. The pan itself is part of the equation. And once you understand that, you stop thinking of these methods as interchangeable shortcuts and start thinking of them as conversations between you and the iron. The second method Esther reaches for is the low braising method. Slower than baking soda, more rewarding than any quick trick. You take that $3 chuck, you brown it properly in the cast iron, not a rush, a real sear that builds the fond, that coaxes out the bitter, savory notes hiding in the meat. 3-4 minutes per side. The pan matters here. Modern non-stick? It won't build the fond properly. Cast iron, it builds it like it was designed to. Then you add your liquid. Beef stock, preferably homemade. If you don't have it, water with a splash of vinegar, a bay leaf, salt, maybe some dried thyme if your kitchen stores it. Then you cover the pot and you put it in a low oven, 275 degrees, for 4 to 5 hours. Not on the stovetop. The oven distributes heat evenly. The covered pot traps the steam. The collagen in the connective tissue breaks down gradually, becomes gelatin, becomes the most luxurious mouthfeel a cheap cut of meat can offer. The baking soda trick does none of this. It denatures protein on the surface. It raises pH. It's mathematics. But this method? This is physics meeting time meeting the specific heat capacity of cast iron. It's why your grandmother's pans were worth keeping. The meat comes out so tender you don't need a knife. The broth becomes sauce. And because the pan retained heat throughout, because nothing was rushed, the flavor deepens layer by layer. This is what takes time to build. Here's where people get confused. They see the baking soda video. They see the results. Then they assume that the fastest method is the most advanced method. But speed isn't the same as skill. A microwave is faster than a cast iron Dutch oven, but it doesn't cook the same way. The baking soda trick is a microwave. The braising method is the oven. Both can finish a meal, but they're not competitors. The third method builds on this, but is different in one crucial way. It's the slow cooker method, or what some families call the overnight method. You prepare the chuck the same way, sear it in cast iron to build the fond. But instead of the oven, you transfer everything to a cast iron Dutch oven or a ceramic pot, add your liquid and vegetables, and let it cook on the lowest possible heat, 210 degrees in the oven, or on the lowest setting if you're using an actual cast iron pot suspended over coals. Overnight, 8 hours, 10 hours. The longer it cooks, the more the collagen converts, the more the flavors marry. Families in rural Pennsylvania, German families especially, would start this in the evening, wake up to the smell, have it ready for lunch. The cast iron pot would stay warm on the back of the stove all day, keeping the braise at a gentle simmer. This is the method that doesn't require you to monitor anything. The low, consistent heat of cast iron means the bottom won't scorch. The meat won't fall apart into shreds. Instead, it softens into this texture, tender, but still holding together, still recognizable as a piece of meat, but yielding completely to your teeth. The baking soda trick promises results in 20 minutes. This method promises results that improve with every hour of cooking, and that will make you understand, finally, why your great-grandmother never replaced her cast iron with anything newer. Both work. Both are real. But one teaches you something. One builds a connection between you and your tools that lasts longer than the meal itself. The smell that comes out of that pot is not something you can replicate with modern cookware. It settles into the kitchen, into your clothes, into the memory. Cast iron holds heat differently than stainless steel or ceramic. It radiates it. The meat doesn't just cook, it bathes in that heat. And here is where the old methods show their true advantage. The baking soda trick works on chemistry alone. It breaks down protein structures through alkaline action, fast, effective, but it treats the steak like a problem to solve, not like a piece of food with its own story. The braising method, any of the old methods, they work because they respect the meat, they take time, they ask something of you, and in return, they give you not just tenderness but flavor that builds as the collagen converts to gelatin, as the herbs marry with the stock, as your cast iron seasoning adds its own whisper to every bite. Your grandmother knew this. She did not have food science videos on her phone. She had time, a good cast iron pot, and the certainty that slow cooking made sense because that was how meat had been cooked for 200 years in her family. Before we continue, I need you to understand something important about your own kitchen. If you own cast iron, even one piece, you already have the tool that makes these methods work. You do not need special equipment. You do not need a Dutch oven with a price tag that makes you hesitate. A 14-inch skillet works. A 12-quart pot that has been in your barn for 20 years works even better. Cast iron is forgiving in ways that modern cookware will never be. Stainless steel demands precision, temperature control, exact timing. Cast iron absorbs your mistakes. A little too hot, it spreads the heat out. A little too long, the retained heat keeps cooking gently, not violently. This is why braising in cast iron produces results that braising in an enameled Dutch oven sometimes does not. Cast iron knows how to carry heat without aggression. I have braised chuck steak in a modern Dutch oven. I have braised the same cut in cast iron. Same recipe, same heat. The cast iron version was better. The surface of the meat had a crust. The inside was softer. The gravy was richer. Why? Because cast iron does not cool down when you add cold stock. It holds its temperature. It distributes the heat evenly across the bottom, so nothing sticks, nothing burns, nothing browns too fast. That consistency, that reliability, is what your great-grandmother was counting on. She did not think about it in those terms. She just knew that her iron pot had never let her down. The other methods we have talked about, the vinegar marinades, the slow roasting, the stewing, they all benefit from cast iron in the same way. The meat cooks better because the tool itself is better. Not because of marketing, not because of price, but because of physics and because of the way iron holds and distributes heat. Now, you might be thinking about the baking soda trick again. If the old methods are so superior, why would anyone use it? And that is the honest question. The answer is time. Modern life moves faster than your great-grandmother's kitchen did. She had an afternoon to let meat braise. You might have 40 minutes. In that case, the baking soda trick serves a real purpose. It is not better. It is faster. That is all it promises. That is all it delivers. But here is what happens when you start using the old methods. You begin to plan differently. You start your braise on Sunday evening, so Monday dinner is already waiting. You pull a chuck roast from the refrigerator on Friday morning, knowing dinner on Sunday will taste better because you gave it time. You stop expecting every meal to arrive in 20 minutes, and your cast iron, the same pot your mother used, the same pot her mother used, it starts to feel less like a tool and more like a trusted part of your kitchen. That shift is the real secret, not the technique, not the ingredient. The shift in how you think about cooking. This is the secret I promised you at the beginning. Not a trick with baking soda. Not a shortcut that works in 30 minutes. The real secret is something older and harder to explain. It lives in the difference between fixing a problem and understanding one. When you sprinkle baking soda on cheap beef, you are solving a surface problem. The meat is tough. Baking soda makes it less tough. Problem solved. But when you take that same chuck steak and you place it in vinegar, in red wine, in buttermilk, you are asking a question. You are asking why the meat is tough in the first place. And once you understand why, everything changes. Tough meat comes from muscle fiber. Muscle fiber comes from work. An animal that walked all day, that carried its own weight, that lived a full life, leaves its story in the muscle. Acid does not erase that story. Acid honors it. Acid breaks down the connective tissue, the way time itself would have broken it down, the way slow heat breaks it down in a braise. The baking soda does the same work faster, but it does nothing for the flavor underneath. You end up with tender meat that tastes like nothing much at all. The old methods do something different entirely. They are not racing against time. they are working with it. 3 days in vinegar, and the acid penetrates past the surface. It reaches into every fiber. The meat does not just become tender. It becomes tender and it carries flavor. It carries memory. It becomes connected to generations of people who learn to stretch meat, to make something expensive taste like something that cost almost nothing. Your great-grandmother did not use baking soda because baking soda did not exist in her kitchen in that form. But if it had, she might not have used it anyway. She had something that baking soda could never give her. She had time, she had patience, she had cast iron that had been seasoned by her own hands, and by her mother's hands, and by her grandmother's hands before that. Every meal she cooked in that pot was building on centuries of flavor. That pot was not just holding food, it was holding history. When you inherit a cast iron skillet from your grandmother, you are inheriting more than metal. You are inheriting her choices, the meals she made, the care she took, the way she understood that cooking was not about speed. It was about connection. And the moment you start using the old methods, the moment you begin planning meals 3 days in advance instead of 3 hours, you step into that inheritance whether you knew you were doing it or not. Here is what matters right now. You own cast iron. Maybe you inherited it. Maybe you bought it. Either way, you have a tool in your kitchen that is capable of something modern non-stick will never be capable of. It can improve with age. It can carry flavor. It can connect you to the past and to the future at the same time. The baking soda trick works. It is real chemistry. But it is the shortcut. The old methods are the investment. This week, take one meal. Just one. Pick a tough cut of beef. Chuck, round, shoulder. Something inexpensive. Submerge it in vinegar. Add onion. Add peppercorns. Cover it. Put it in your refrigerator. Then wait. 3 days. When you cook it, your cast iron is going to do the rest. You will taste the difference. Your family will taste the difference. And you will understand why your grandmother never needed a trick from the internet. She had something better. She had time, and she had iron. Thank you for watching. If this video meant something to you, please subscribe so you never miss a new episode. Leave a comment and tell me about the cast iron in your own kitchen, the piece with history in it. I read every single one. And tap that notification bell so the moment we upload, you know about it. We will see you next time.